Welcome back, everybody, to His Heartbeat. And I have a friend here, Katie Sampias. Did I say it right? Sampias.
It's pretty close. Yeah, I think that's right. Katie
Sampias is
Sampias.
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
So you can tell as I can't pronounce her last name that she's a new friend for me. Hi, Katie. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and a little bit about your family.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
I am Katie Sampias. I am a mother of three kids. They are 7, 5, and 3. The
Mm.
oldest two are girls, and then I have a boy. I'm married to a wonderful man called Matt. I live in Brisbane, Australia, um, which is on the East Coast. My husband's American, so I have lived in the States. Um, and I
Were
have
you
recently
in the States for long?
2 years, yeah,
2 years.
in different places, yeah. Mainly based in San Francisco, but um, my husband was doing consulting, so we were going to a few different places. And Sue just had told me that she's from Philadelphia, and I had a wonderful time in Philadelphia. That was actually my favorite place in the States. I found it the easiest place to connect with people. It's just like very open and un there's no pretense. That's how I describe it. Pretty brotherly love. So yeah.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. I don't always hear that, but I'm really happy to hear that. So
Oh,
I would say that people here are more authentic,
yes, that's what
but
I found.
I
Yeah.
would say that's true, but maybe not as outwardly like friendly as a Southerner. So I think
Um,
you'll have that
well, I'm
hospitality,
maybe
but
that's why I liked it because in Australia, people they don't just talk to you for the sake of talking to you. People often say that Australians are not friendly, but we're just not good at, I think we're not good at small talk. So it's probably
mm,
like the Philadelphia.
okay, there you go. So I guess I got to get to Australia. I will get there. I know I will, Katie, because both my husband and I want to go. We were actually supposed to go in 2020 and it got canceled, obviously. The
Yes,
mission trip. That's what happened for
yeah,
us.
yeah. I'm glad that time's over. Our borders were closed for a few years, which is crazy.
Oh,
Anyway,
wow. Yeah, that is crazy. Well, you're an author, correct? So, tell us about that. How did you get into that? Even why did you get into writing in a capacity to share it with the world?
yeah, so I've always loved writing.
Hmm.
Just this last week, I went to visit my kids' school, and I talked to the year sixes there, and I had to talk about how I got into writing. And I told them, well, yeah, I guess it was probably in about year three that I recognized that this was a thing. Maybe year 2 or 3,
Hmm.
when we'd have free writing time, I would write pages and pages, and other people would write a paragraph. And I just
Okay.
wanted to have that time keep going. Um, so I really liked writing, coming up with stories. When I was 12, I entered a competition for the papers and ended up winning a trip to Vanuatu,
Well,
from submitting pieces to the paper. And then, it was something that I always liked. I didn't go straight away to college and study creative writing, though, because I didn't think that would be a solid career path. But I did go back after I was working full time. Um, and study journalism. And when I was studying journalism, I did some courses on creative writing, and one was historical fiction.
hmm.
And the very first piece I wrote that was a part of this book that I wrote, Her Story of Jesus, was actually an assignment for that subject. And I wrote about Pilate's wife and from her perspective, how it was to witness the s- sentencing of Jesus. Um, So from that time, that was probably 2012 that I started writing this book. It's taken me over 12 years to write
Oh, well.
um, a whole series of different stories from women's perspectives. And it was over time that I was led to understand that it was going to be a whole book, and it it's not only the stories, but I also reflect on my own experience and what I learned in the process of writing these stories. And what I call it is a form of investigative, imaginative prayer. Um, I say that writing this book was a pilgrimage for me. It drew me closer to Jesus, helped me understand what Jesus was truly like to women, and understand more deeply the love that he has for me and women.
Mm, wow, it's beautiful. So it's called Her Story of Jesus. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her story
And
of
so
Jesus.
it's all different. The story, it's written fictionally in a way, right?
Yeah. So it's got I think there's 10 or 11 short stories in it, which are historical fiction, but it's based on the Bible stories. Um, so there's elements that are imagined that could have happened according to the
Okay.
Bible
Okay.
stories. Um, and it's kind of a little bit like the series The Chosen, I guess. But I always say that I started writing this before The Chosen, so I didn't get inspired by it. I love The Chosen, but I didn't get inspired by The Chosen to write the book. It was already something that was planted within me. Um,
Well,
but yeah,
maybe
if
you
people
should
want a
share
quick
your book
reference,
with them because they might want to make some some episodes out of it or a separate
maybe.
series. Yeah, it might be worth it, Katie.
Just reach out to my friend Dallas. Hi, Dallas. I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't hurt, to send it on. That's great. Yeah, so when you say historical fiction, did you do a bunch of historical research for each character? And if so, how did you go about that?
That's an interesting question. So, when I did my historical fiction course at, um, I guess you call it college, but I call it university. They actually say, you have with writing historical fiction, yes, you need to do research, but you also don't want to do too much research because you don't want to take away from your imaginative license. So, yes, I did research things as I went along. For example, how I'd write it was, I'd, I'd come up with sort of, I'd have images in my head of parts of a story. And then what I'd do is I'd look at the Bible story, all the diff if it was in several gospels, I'd read all of them. If it was in one, I'd just focus on that one, obviously.
Hmm.
And then I would ask questions about things like, you know, what food were they eating? And, when I was describing the scene, what could I hear in the scene? Um, and just I just came up with a whole lot of questions that I was
Hmm.
wondering about, and then those were the things that I'd research. Um, I talk about the one of the stories that I do is the wedding at Cana, and I realized that I didn't actually know that much about Jesus's followers, like the details of what they may have looked like or what their backgrounds were, and then I go and do research.
Or what a wedding was like back then, right?
Yeah, what a wedding was like back then,
And the wine
exactly.
and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And interestingly, with you can find some things, but not everything is known, especially about the
Hmm.
women.
Oh,
And
yeah, good
so,
point.
um, and then also when for a few reasons, I started off with this writing about characters that were a bit lesser known. So
Hmm.
Pilate's wife, there's not that much we know about her, but she would have been, she's married to Pilate, so she would have been a Roman, um, presumably a Roman citizen, and she lived by that culture. So I'd research about what life was like for a Roman woman.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
And what Pilate was like. And then you can imagine what it'd be like to be married to him.
yes,
Right?
exactly.
Bummer.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I'd do with my research. I'd research as I'd be led along the path of writing the story, and I'd use the research to help me come up with inspiration. So I guess it's sort of a stimulus to your writing, in this sense, the
And to
research.
even as you said that, I'm thinking, oh, that's cool. If you ask all those questions, Like
Mm,
Katie, honestly, as you're sharing this, I'm like, and we're listening, and a lot of the people listening are not writers, and I'm a
mm,
writer, but I'm not a fictional writer. So that whole idea of use your imagination
mm.
is really helpful to our personal walk with God. And you'd be
Definitely.
interested. Yeah, I did this whole message when the Lord says to love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That the soul word includes, its original meaning, right? Includes the idea of your imagination as well. So to
Mm,
love him even with your imagination, which is what you were doing, right?
mm,
So tell me about that. Like, as you started beyond just the historical research of it, but you're actually imagining what was it like to be Pilate's wife, for example.
mm.
What did that do for you in your walk with God?
Um, yeah, so I've been introduced to the idea of imaginative prayer probably since I was a kid. I was familiar with it, but and I do pieces of it, but never as in depth
Mm,
as this book. So I just imagine myself in a story and, be in the scene and then see what happens. But, I wouldn't write it down. And then I was like, I really want to know what actually happened in these gospel stories. I
mm-hmm,
really want to get into the details and that minutiae of it. Is that how I say it? Minutiae. I never see it,
mm-hmm.
hear it, so I see it written,
Minutia. Minutia,
minutiae.
anyway. That's a Philadelphia accent, anyway. I don't know about other places.
Yeah, so I really wanted to see what actually happened. And as I was saying, like I started with some lesser characters, and I realized over time that that was because I was probably not ready to be very up close with Jesus.
Mm,
The other reason is that some of the very well-known characters, people have very strong views on them. And one of the
mm,
controversial things, perhaps, about my book is that there's no Mary Magdalene. Like the lady that I have experiencing the resurrection is actually Joanna. Um, she's lesser known, but she also has an interesting backstory, because she was uh, married to the steward of Herod Antipas, I think. So she would have been wealthy. Um, and so I mentioned her for the resurrection story because Mary Magdalene, everyone has an opinion on, but also I get very confused about the Marys because there's like
I know.
so many Marys in
Well,
the
and there's
gospel
even
stories.
debate on that. I did a whole
Yeah.
Bible study on that and the possibilities. Yeah.
And who
Which one
overlaps.
was which? Yeah, at what
Yeah.
time? I know. Yeah, there's
I wanted
debate
to
over that.
avoid that.
Yeah, that was smart. And I named my
Um,
daughter Joanna, so good job.
oh, nice. Oh, cool. Um, yeah, it was some historians. When I was doing research, I actually came across her from these lady theologians, and they were going out to see where she would have lived and stuff. And I got inspired by
Mm,
that as well. That was another
cool.
reason I chose her. Um, yeah, so over time, though, I got more comfortable writing with the characters that were a bit closer to Jesus. And
Hmm.
through the process of writing this book, I was able to imagine Jesus and see him in my imagination a lot better.
Hmm.
And I learned a lot of things along the way. And things would happen in my stories that I didn't expect. Like with the birth story, I did the birth story, Mary's birth story, but from the perspective of a midwife. Midwife's
Oh.
not mentioned, but I did it from that perspective and imagined what it was like for Mary. And my intention going into it was that I was going to focus on more like the human aspect of and the wonderful human aspect of giving birth. But
Mm.
actually, as I wrote it, I encountered more of the divine experience that happened in that stable, and how the midwife was um, changed by the the different nature of the birth and how she experienced something supernatural in that setting. So things would happen in my imagination that would change the course of the story. That wasn't sort of me. Like I had to listen to what God was saying to me, and it would just sort of happen in my imagination, if you know what I mean. And then sometimes I get stuck and I'd have to pray and say, God, like inspire me, like what's supposed to happen next in this story. And an example of how things that happened with regards to that when I got stuck was originally when I was writing the stories, there were actually there was one wedding at Cana story, but I realized that it didn't really make sense because I was imagining it from two different perspectives. And I eventually separated them out. There's one from the perspective of this a servant there, and there's also one from the perspective of the bride. But I couldn't finish the bride story until I actually had gone through my own wedding and experienced all the emotions that you do
Oh,
leading
okay.
up to and going through a wedding. So
Yeah,
then yeah, that's why I couldn't do it, I realized, until after I'd experienced it. Um, so
that's
yeah,
really true. Yeah. Until I remember my son when he's a writer too, and when he first started writing way back in high school, he hadn't, I think it was even like 10th grade, he'd never been in a relationship with a girl yet. He's trying to write about that, and it just was really flat, you know.
mm,
But now, it's so different as he writes about relationships and pain that you can have in that, and joy that you can have in that. It's come alive because he's experienced some of that. So it makes a difference, doesn't it?
definitely. Um, yeah, so I think you asked me, the question was how it changed my relationship with Jesus, and
Mm-hmm.
my answer is that it drew me a lot closer, and
Mm.
I there's just things that I experienced that I wouldn't have experienced or imagined if I hadn't gone through this process, and that makes me more connected to Jesus. But I also think like that we all have our um, individual relationships with Jesus. So I think
Mm-hmm.
if other people tried to write this, they'd imagine different things and have a different perspective and angle. So everyone's story could be different.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone could write this book, but it would come out differently
Yeah.
because Jesus speaks to us differently.
And I appreciate that you say, historical fiction. People are so hesitant to read or write about stories from the Bible because, they're not quote unquote inspired by God. That's
Mm,
not the word of God. And they think, oh, I better not write that because, you know, it might not be accurate or it won't be accurate. But I think when you clarify, this is fiction, this is just how God leads me in my imagination. I think it's fine. And also, what you're sharing with us now is it's even a healthy practice to go deeper with God. You can do that. Like when I read, in fact, I did it last night when I fell up, was laid down to fall asleep, and I let myself imagine what it would be like, Psalm 23, and
mm.
I imagine myself just walking along the side of the river with Jesus as a sheep. What that
You are the
would be
sheep of the
like.
story.
I was the sheep, and
I've
the
never written from
peace
that
that I
point of view
felt.
before, but that's an interesting one, the
Yeah, well,
sheep's
I love
perspective.
animals, so I try to get in the head of my dog all the time. But anyway, so yeah, but I just think that's we're encouraged to grow in our love relationship with God, even that way, imagining scripture, which you put into writing and are making a book out of it. It's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are hesitations around, reading historical fiction based on the Bible. I mean, there's ones that are not historically accurate, like what is it, like the Da Vinci Code and stuff, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
people start to think it's real, but it's fiction. But this is written from my heart because I'm trying to get in contact with Jesus, not because I'm trying to make a lot of money writing a fictional novel based on controversial topics. So I think the intention is
Right.
really different. So yeah, I guess
Yeah,
like it
you're
could,
still in alignment with scripture, right? Like if in your imagination you wrote a book saying that Jesus didn't really die on the cross, that he actually put Judas on the cross and he's the one that got nailed, that would be different,
no,
right?
it's not
But
like
you're
I'm
not
imagining Jesus as a
distorting,
woman or something. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's not.
you're not distorting what scripture is. You're just filling in the gaps a bit. you know.
Mm.
That's what
Yeah, I
they
mean,
do in The Chosen, and boy, they get a lot of grief for that. But I want to tell you that series has brought so many people to the Lord, thousands and thousands who would not normally listen, would not normally give the Bible time of day, and all of a sudden they want to know Jesus, which I'm sure your
mm,
book is doing the same. That's beautiful.
I hope so. Um, yeah, it's interesting because you're filling in the gaps, so you're making a more like 3D dimensional piece of art about who Jesus is. Whereas the Gospels are like really like I find them quite well written and like, but they're so scant on detail and like
Yeah,
sometimes they just only have like one line about something. And it's actually amazing that they condense them so well. And
I
then
know,
they
but
even
it's
had
frustrating sometimes.
yeah,
Like, I want to know more.
or no more. Yeah, yeah, it's frustrating. But maybe it was just because I don't know why it was, but maybe it was because at the time there weren't that many people that wrote. Like, I don't think that there weren't people that wrote novels back in that time when they wrote the Gospels after Jesus died. So I don't know what
And
type
we
of
and
writing
we
is that.
heard he wrote what we needed to know. That's
No,
another
yeah,
thing, right? Yeah.
yeah.
You
But I
know,
find it
like
amazing.
if you want
Yeah.
to come to my house, I just give you my address and you can look on GPS. I don't say, and then when you see the Lutheran church on the left, then turn left and then come down 11 houses and we're on I don't have to tell you that. Like, maybe it's like that. He tells us the things that we need to know.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the Gospels amaze me because they even kind of slip in like humor and stuff, even though they're
Mm,
so
true.
brief. And
Mm,
and then sometimes I want to expand on that like a little bit. Um, like in my story with the wedding at Cana when Mary says, Jesus, you got to do something about this. I don't think that's a direct quote, but
mhm.
that was the essence of what she said. And then he's like, "Oh, hey, woman, what do you want from me?" I think originally when I imagined that, like, I'm like, he's talking back to his mother. Like, but then, like, when I imagine it now, it's like, it's kind of like him going, "Hey, mom, what are you doing?" Like, I kind of imagine him saying it with a smile, like, it's not my time. Like, what are you doing? Hassling me,
Uh-huh.
kind of jokingly. So you
Uh-huh.
can take things really differently
Mm,
to how you originally read them when you get to know Jesus a bit more.
yeah, that's good. It's interesting because when I was teaching in China and um and I would ask the ladies, I'd say, okay, when you mess up, you whatever, you scream at your kids when you know you shouldn't, what do you how do you think God is feeling towards you at that moment? Is what is he saying to you? And and I also use the Bible story when um, the storm came and Jesus is asleep and they wake him up and then and like you gotta get up and then Jesus rebukes them. Why you have so little faith? And so I have women come up and act that out for me, and in both those scenarios they were like screaming at Jesus, or Jesus was screaming at the disciples, like, "What do you mean like that? Why do you have such terrible faith?" and
Oh, that's
and I,
interesting. I wouldn't
right,
imagine it
and
like that.
kind of
Yeah.
across the board, I was getting that, and I said, because that's the culture. The culture
Oh.
is you do it right, and if you don't
Hmm.
do it right, then you're going to get scolded harshly and that will help you was the thought, bring shame and then you won't do it again. But Jesus doesn't ever do that, right?
Yeah,
He
that's
can be
interesting. It's
very
a cultural difference.
serious. Yeah, he can be very serious, but he scolds with love and with
Mm.
patience, right? And in that case, probably with some sorrow, like you're not getting
Mm.
this yet, like bummer, And so I would use the voice, like, oh, why are you not getting this? Why do
Like
you not have
frustration. Yeah.
faith yet? Don't you know how much I love you, And they're like amazed, the audience. And I'm like, this is how God feels toward you when you sin
Mm.
and he asks you to repent. Whereas they were carrying so much guilt and shame. And that's
Yeah,
in our
yeah.
conference, we were trying to set them free from that, right? But it's just interesting that when, like, you're using your imagination, right? But you have, I think it's important, and probably what went wrong in the Da Vinci Code is that he did not have a proper view of God, a proper understanding of the Lord. Whereas, and that, yeah, then you're going to come up with some pretty terrible fictional writing. But for you, for you, because you have a beautiful view of God and his wonderful character of love and grace, kindness and goodness, and yet holiness, that comes across in your writing. Do you feel like that?
I hope so. I hope so. Um, Maybe you can use some of my stories in your workshops too, and then see how good it
I
goes.
know. There you go.
One
I
thing, yeah,
send me a
you brought.
copy of your book
Okay.
and I'll see if I can fit it in there. That's good.
Um. So yeah, you brought up something interesting, Sue, about when you're acting something out or
Mm,
you're doing something in your imagination, and something can pop up that's perhaps not correct.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it can tell you something about your relationship with God, maybe something that you have that that's wrong, like how these
Right.
women thought that Jesus was really angry at them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another use for it, is that you can
Mm,
recognize that, and then someone can talk to you about that and go, oh, I actually don't think that's how he would have said that. And
yeah.
you recognize that you have this sort of image of God that's mean, and then come to an understanding that that's public, perhaps that's incorrect. So it's
Mm-hmm.
another use for imaginative prayer.
Yeah. And I mean, I've used that in counseling women to have them journal and then share with me. And I learn a lot as a counselor when they share
Mm,
that, and I get a better perspective. Another thing that I do, I don't, you have to be at a certain place, I guess, in your walk with God. But there's been times where I really had something serious to work through, right?
mm,
And so I'll just start writing to the Lord and be like, I
mm,
feel like this, I feel like this, I feel like this. And then I just stop. I might write a question and I'll
mm.
stop. And whatever then next thoughts I hear in my head, then I write them down. And that's God, just his spirit, just speaking to me. And now I'm writing as fast as I can. And I know it's him because I can't even hardly keep up, and I write all that out. And I do want to preface that with I start this exercise really inviting God to protect me and
Mm.
really speak to me and let me only hear your voice, right? You know, like the enemy's voice in there. And boy, it's been really a cool practice. I don't do it all the time, but sometimes, especially if I really feel stuck or distant from him or struggling in some way, then it really gives him space and me space together with him to hear from him.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that too. I haven't done that one recently, but maybe I should try that again.
Yeah, don't they call that free writing? Something like that. I remember taking a
I heard it
course.
called colloquy, having conversation with God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the free writing in the sense of where I remember taking this course and they said, don't just sit there and think, okay, what am I going to write? Get it all planned out, right? Take time. You just write whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You're not worrying
Free
about
writing.
grammar. You're not right. You just write.
Mm.
And is that how you kind of started out going about
Yeah,
writing?
there's parts of it that I did like that. Um,
Mm. And then you'd
yeah,
make
it's
revisions or whatever.
I definitely didn't start from the beginning of the story and write the whole way through. Like it was little bits of pieces that would come to me over time.
Mm. And you took how long to write this?
12 years.
Wow.
And I didn't know originally at the beginning that it was going to be a book. I'm not exactly sure when it occurred to me that it was a book.
Hmm.
I had this image of um, I wanted to know about the women and how they got to know each other, and then how they were. ministering at the end together. So there is a story at the end where I imagine sort of like 10 years after Jesus's death and resurrection, where the and
Mm,
what the lives of the women were like at the time, and what sort of ministries they did together.
that's cool. I found that interesting in The Chosen. I forget, it's further into it, like the third season or so. And they have these beginning parts where they like project back into King David or whatever history. But this one projected what you just said into the future. And they had, I believe it's Matthew and not Mary, yeah, Mary Magdalene were well, Matthew came to a cave where she was hiding out. It was kind of like a headquarters, apparently. And it was just interesting how it made me aware of how difficult life was for them after Jesus died and all the persecution and how a lot of them had to hide out. You just picture otherwise, these men sitting up in Jerusalem in this proper office, or in a church, in a synagogue or something, and like the headquarters of Christianity, but it probably wasn't. It's probably like,
No, for like 300
hiding
years at
out.
least, wasn't it? Until, is it
Yeah.
Constantine or something in like the 300s?
Yeah.
I
I
think they
mean,
were
but right
persecuted.
after they were really hiding out, and yet they knew where each other were. It kind of reminds me
Mm.
of like here in the slave, where they call the underground, you know, and even in China when I was there, there's a lot of underground activity going on, and they all knew where each other was, but it
Mm.
was all kind of secretive. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, so you really got a lot out of that. So what now?
Yeah, I
Besides
get asked this
marketing your
question.
book.
Marketing my book, yes, that's a full-time job. I am starting to explore how God talks to us through fantasy.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've had some conversations with people about it, and I think it's sort of linked to the creation story. And yeah, I'm wondering about it. I did some AI research the other day, which freaked me out because I ended up writing me a whole essay on it. And I haven't actually read it yet because I was like, oh, this is a bit scary. But I read the first part and I was like, oh, I don't think there's some things that AI can do. They can put together research, but there's no heart in it. So, okay, that made me feel a bit
Mm,
better. But yeah, sort of considering the famous fantasy writers like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, um, and what they got out of the fantasy world and how God talks to us through the fantasy world, and then how the fantasy world can lead to healing. So that's what I'm exploring at the moment, but I don't really know exactly what the book's going to be about. Um, so I'm just looking into that at the moment, dipping in and seeing what comes.
mm. Well, good luck with that. That sounds challenging. Yeah, so do you want to give any parting words to, I'm just thinking how you didn't even know you were writing a book,
Hmm.
but you were writing, well, first I'll ask you before you get into like your parting words for us, but uh why were you doing that writing? Was it just for fun? Was it an outlet? What to
It was
help your walk
originally
with
for
God?
myself because I wanted to know what happened in the gospel stories for my own understanding. So I originally wrote these stories for myself, but then I realized over time, "Oh, maybe people want to read my stories. Maybe I'm meant to share this," which is a big thing for me because I'm not very public about my faith. I'm pretty
Mm,
private when it comes to that. I never talk about it at work or anything like that.
mm,
So then I've been thinking about, well, we're called to evangelize, but maybe everyone has a different way of evangelizing. So this
mhm.
is my unique evangelization technique.
No, that's great. Yeah, at Christmas time, we had a group of us put together a little book during COVID, okay, to encourage people. And it's pretty short, so I put it on self-publishing on Amazon, so it didn't cost me too much to get it author copies. And so I gave a copy to 22 of my neighbors, and it was great. It gave me an opportunity to have a spiritual conversation with a lot of them that normally I wouldn't have been able to have. They wouldn't have been open to that. But I could just say, "Oh, did you get my book? What did you think?" That kind of thing. And it got into some pretty good conversation. And one older woman, she read it 5 times. She put it by her bedside and just kept reading, reading. And I was so encouraged because I didn't even know she had a faith in God, but it really opened conversation for us. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I joke because like originally like the title of my book, I was like maybe I could make it something a bit less obviously religious, like
Oh,
Women of the Way or something. And
yeah.
then I talked to my publisher about it, they're like, well, you have to have it so people can connect with the story. I'm like, yep. So I can't really avoid the fact that I am openly Christian. And this book is very Christian because it has Jesus at the title. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a challenge for me. Um, yeah, but a good challenge.
Well, for whenever you get your other one written, um, something like fantasy and faith. Because
Mm.
actually, a lot of people use that word faith that aren't necessarily Christian,
Mm.
or the spirituality of fantasy. It's funny
Mm.
because um, my newest book, Shaking Off the Shackles, I can't even remember the subtitle, or what do you call it, the next line, because it wasn't mine, it was the publisher. But I didn't like it, but I went with it because they were just insistent. But it's live out your divine birthright and thrive like never before. I just wanted to thrive like never before, but they put the live out your divine birthright. And my health coach uses that word divine a lot. She relates to the divine, and I'm not comfortable with it, I think, because to me it sounds very new age, but I guess it's not. But words carry a lot of can carry a lot of impact, I guess,
Mm.
to people,
Yeah. Mm.
whether they're going to read it or not read it, if they want to have a conversation with you or not.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, it was something that was tricky to go through and work out, the word. I want words. I want everyone to feel comfortable with it. People that may not even be believers, I want them to be comfortable reading it. And then also people that are very aware of words, I wanted them to be aware with it. So I tried to sort of walk the line with that. And my publisher helped with that.
good. When did you release it?
July, 8th of
Okay.
July.
I would really, if I were you, push it heavily on any emails and social media during for Christmas,
Mm,
like
yeah.
beginning in right after Thanksgiving,
Mm,
because people, yeah, they're kind of okay about the whole Christmas story. And
mm,
they might even buy those kind of books to share with their kids, or to,
mm.
that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely try with that.
you could
Yeah.
even do a little kids book with that. Get somebody who's a can draw well, and do like a kiddie version introducing those different women to
Mm.
little
Yeah, that's a good
girls.
idea. Yeah.
That'd be really cool. So there you go. My 2 cents. If you make money off that idea, send me a check. No, just kidding. Oh, that's fun, funny. Okay, well, this is great, Katie. This is fun. And so give us your parting encouraging words for people who've in the back of their mind thought, I should write a book someday.
Oh, for people that write a book, yeah, if you have a book plan in your heart, and you want to write a book, you can do it because, I definitely had that buried within me that the desire to write a book. Just gotta listen to God and wait for God's leading. Because I used to have all this thing, this you know, desire to do it, but then thinking I couldn't do it. But it's not really me that did it. It's God that did it. So if you want to write a book for God, just trust God and go with the leading.
Yeah, that's right. And you can always self-publish, and it does not cost much. And if nobody else buys your book, you can, your family will, and you have it all done and nice and reach your goal.
It's also really like um a lady that I came across in the process of endorsement, because my husband works for Mission Aviation Fellowship. She wrote a book all about her experiences being the wife of a pilot in Africa, and she endorsed my book. And she actually wrote a book, and she didn't even do it for the purpose of publishing. She actually wrote it for her mother's birthday,
Hmm.
80th birthday, and then someone actually sent it to a publisher without her knowing, and now it's published by a publisher.
Yeah,
Um,
funny.
yeah,
That's awesome. That's
so you
great.
can do it for gifts as well. So for
Yeah,
people.
that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. And if you guys have any ideas about wanting to write, really keep praying about it and see if God's leading you to do that. Or somebody like that, but they're hesitating, you can send them this episode. So, how do we find your book? How do we find you?
Um, the easiest way and where I'm most active is on Substack. I'm Katie Sampias on Substack. Um, and then my book's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Calapress. In the States, if you just Google my name, Katie Sampias, you'll be able to find where you can buy my book quite easily. Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find on the internet now, all over
Good.
the place.
And so it's called Her Story of Jesus. Thank you so
Yes,
much, Katie. We appreciate your time.
thanks, Sue.
Okay, everybody have a great week and go get a fun book that you like. Go get Katie's book and sit down and have a nice, enjoyable week. See you next week.